Thank you for joining us for today's video presentation. After this video teaching, Brenda and I invite you to visit our website, where you will find many free resources and our video archives of previous teachings. Our bookstore has all of our current books and many of our teachings available on DVD. Also, right on the home page is the sign-up form for our email list, where you will receive our exclusive monthly newsletter. With the newsletter, you will get access to exclusive teachings, Bible research tools and resources, a monthly biblical calendar and Bible reading schedule following the traditional Torah portions, and other exclusive materials and access to future special events. We know that you will enjoy the teaching today. Thank you for joining us. Shalom and be blessed. Jacob had 12 sons, but 2 of those sons, Judah and Joseph, end up with the birthright and the blessings of Abraham. As Judah and Joseph are introduced and begin to play a more prominent role in the Bible, the primary storyline follows that of Joseph, but Judah's story is inserted into the narrative. The story then reverts to Joseph. Finally, as the story of Joseph reaches a conclusion, Judah once more plays a prominent role. In part 1, we examined Judah's story. We followed along as Judah's character was shaped by the loss of 2 sons and the unexpected gift of 2 others. Judah learned empathy and compassion for others. Now, in this second part of our teaching, we will examine Joseph's story and how the refining of Judah and Joseph's character allowed them to be reconciled. I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is Shadows of the Messiah. Joseph was a brash young man, reveling in his position of favored son. When he had a dream about his brothers bowing down to him, he wasn't hesitant about telling his dream to his brothers. Genesis 37, 5-6. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream, which I have dreamed." He was so obviously their father's favorite that they couldn't hold any peaceable conversation with him. It was in fact so bad that they couldn't even extend the traditional greeting of peace to you, to him. Look at Genesis 37, verse 4. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. The phrase "speak peaceably to him" could be translated that they could not speak peace to him. The enmity was so great that even tendering a greeting extending that blessing of peace on him was totally intolerable to them. So it should come as no surprise that relating a dream in which his brothers who hated him would then take advantage of an opportunity to get him out of their lives permanently. When Jacob sent Joseph to check that all was well with them, or shalom with them, Joseph's brothers conspired to kill him. Look at Genesis 37, verse 20. "Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, 'Some wild beast has devoured him.' We shall see what will become of his dreams." Now, they eventually decided to sell him into slavery, reasoning that instead of them bowing down to Joseph, Joseph would learn to bow down to others. Their actions had some unforeseen repercussions. Jacob's grief was unrelenting, and the brothers regretted the pain they had caused their father. So Judah, the one who suggested selling Joseph, took the brunt of it and separated himself from his family. We learned that he went down to the Canaanites, just like Joseph went down to Egypt. Now in part 1, we followed Judah's descent from his family. Now we will follow Joseph's descent into Egypt as he learns humility. Look at Genesis 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guards, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. Joseph is sold into the household of Potiphar, the captain of the guards. Now, since God is with Joseph in his exile, just like he was with Joseph's father Jacob in his exile, Joseph quickly prospers. Look at Genesis 39, verses 3 through 4. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority. Joseph did everything right. He was faithful to his master in all his actions. Potiphar's affairs prospered under Joseph's stewardship, but circumstances beyond Joseph's control led to his fall from favor. Potiphar's wife desired Joseph, and when Joseph turned her down, she took revenge. She accused Joseph of attempting to rape her. Let's look at Genesis 39, verses 19 through 20. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused. Then Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. Potiphar's put Joseph into the prison where Pharaoh's particular prisoners were kept. This was where those who had angered or offended Pharaoh ended up. Now, Joseph, who had rebuffed Potiphar's wife's advances, ended up in a political prison. I'm sure Joseph felt like everything kept going wrong. First, his brothers sell him into slavery. Then, when he ended up with a good master and things were going well, something else happened. Not only was he a slave, he was now a slave in prison. But the scriptures tell us God was with him. Let's look at Genesis 39, verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Joseph once again proved his trustworthiness and was quickly put in charge of the entire prison. Look at Genesis 39, 22 through 23. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. In spite of the circumstances, Joseph continued to trust in God and faithfully perform the tasks given to him. He persevered even when Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, whom Joseph had helped while in prison, forgot to mention Joseph when he was restored to Pharaoh's side. When Joseph was finally released from the prison, it wasn't to resume his duties as a slave to Potiphar. It was to become the second in command of the entire nation of Egypt. Look at Genesis 41, verse 39 through 41. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. Only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Joseph's main duty was to prepare for the coming famine. For 7 years, he faithfully organized the storage of food items. He was caught up in the life of Egypt. Pharaoh provided a wife for him, and he had 2 sons. The names of the sons show that he is thinking only of his life in Egypt and not his life back in Canaan. Look at Genesis 41, 50 through 52. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of the famine came, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bore to him. Now Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction." Joseph had put the past behind him and chose to remember the blessings that he had received in the land in which he was sold into slavery. When the famine began, Joseph was the one who sold food back to the people. And one day, his 10 older brothers showed up to buy grain. And Joseph remembered his dream. Look at Genesis 42, verses 8 through 9. So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dream which he had dreamed about them, and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." Joseph chose to test his brothers to determine what kind of men they had become. Over 20 years had gone by since they had sold him into slavery. How was his brother Benjamin being treated? Were they cruel to Benjamin as they had been cruel to him? Joseph manipulated the situation so that they would have to bring Benjamin with them if they wanted to purchase more grain. Look at Genesis 42, 19 through 20. "If you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses, and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Joseph increased the tension by holding Simeon in prison until they returned. He created uncertainty by returning the money that they had used to purchase grain. Or how would Joseph's brothers balance the need to buy grain again and the potential danger to Benjamin? Reuben offers his 2 sons to Jacob as hostage if he doesn't safely bring Benjamin back. Look at Genesis 42, verse 37. "Then Reuben spoke to his father, saying, 'Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you.'" Jacob did not receive that offer too kindly. From his perspective, he had already lost both Joseph and Simeon. Losing 2 grandsons wouldn't help. Then Judah stepped up. Judah, like Jacob, had experienced the grief of losing 2 sons. He knew that Jacob was feeling and fearing. Further, he was responsible for Jacob's loss of Joseph. Judah offered life instead of death. Look at Genesis 43, verses 8 through 9. "Then Judah said to Israel his father, 'Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever.'" The word translated as bear is number 2398, chata, meaning to miss the mark. This word is the one most commonly translated as sin. Judah is offered to bear the sin if he fails to bring Benjamin back to safety. Judah realizes that he is already responsible for Jacob's loss of Joseph, perhaps even feels responsible for Simeon's imprisonment while in Egypt. Reuben had attributed their misfortune to their sin for selling Joseph. Look at Genesis 42, verse 22. "And Reuben answered them, saying, 'Did I not speak to you, saying, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us.'" We see that Judah has changed. He is taking responsibility for his actions of the past and is determined that they will not be repeated. When Joseph's brothers return to Egypt, they are greeted by Joseph's steward with the greeting of peace. Look at Genesis 43, verse 23. "But he said, 'Peace be with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money.' Then he brought Simeon out to them." The brothers who could not greet Joseph with peace are greeted with peace. In fact, the actions that follow are designed to remind them of when they sold Joseph into slavery. Joseph had been sent to his brothers to determine if it was well with them and their flocks. Joseph's brothers met him with hostility, throwing him into a pit that had no water. While Joseph was in the pit, the brothers sat down for a meal. Genesis 37:23-25. So when it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him, and they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, there was no water in it, and they sat down to eat a meal. Now when Joseph's brothers arrive in Egypt, they are greeted with peace, given water, and prepared for a meal. Genesis 43:24-25. So the man brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their donkeys feed. Then they made the present ready for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they would eat bread there. When Joseph joins them, his first inquiry is if it is well or peace with their father. Look at Genesis 43:27. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" This is also the first of 3 times that his brothers bow down to him during this entire incident. Genesis 43, verse 26. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand to the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. After the meal, Joseph sent his brothers on their way back to Canaan, but he had another surprise for them. He had planted a silver cup into Benjamin's sack to implicate him in stealing the cup. Now, how would the older brothers react when Joseph demanded that Benjamin become his slave? Judah pled on behalf of his father and then offered to be a slave in Benjamin's place. Look at Genesis 44:33-34. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? Now Joseph heard the words that he was hoping to hear. Judah, the brother who was the most culpable for selling him into slavery, offered himself to slavery in the place of his youngest brother Benjamin. He offered out of love for his father Jacob. Joseph could no longer hold himself back. He ordered that the room be cleared, and he wept, finally revealing his identity to his brothers. Genesis 45, verse 3. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. Joseph convinced his brothers that he meant them good and not harm. He could hardly wait to be reunited with his father and to provide for his entire family. Genesis 45, verses 9-11. "Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord over all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there is still 5 years of famine.'" After being reassured of Joseph's intentions, they greeted each other with kisses. And finally, Joseph's brothers, who could not even greet Joseph with peace, spoke to him. Look at Genesis 45, 14-15. "Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them, and after that his brothers talked with him." Joseph has learned humility and kindness. He no longer wants to lord it over his brothers. He tells his brothers not to be grieved any longer over their actions. What they had intended for evil, God knew ahead of time that it would be for all of their salvation. Look at Genesis 45, verse 5. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph goes on to say that it was God's plan that Joseph be in Egypt in a position to save all of their lives with a great deliverance. When Jacob and all the entire family moved to Egypt, Jacob now sends Judah out to meet up with Joseph. Look at Genesis 46, verse 28. Then he sent Judah before him to Joseph, to point out before him the way to Goshen, and they came to the land of Goshen. And so we have come full circle back to the time when Jacob sent Joseph to his brothers to see if it was well or peace with them. When Yeshua came to this earth, he came to see if it was well with his brothers. They, like Joseph's brothers, rejected him and sold him to the Romans. But God knew what he was doing. What they intended for evil, God orchestrated for a great deliverance. Thanks for watching today. I'm Dan Cathcart, and this has been Shadows of the Messiah. Shalom, and be blessed.